Gentlemen, start your engines!
We have a few longer video projects in the works, but in the meantime, we thought it would be a great time to drop another He Drove What video. This one will be the second instance of highlighting times where drivers made up to a handful of starts in a unique car for different reasons. This one will focus solely on the Busch Grand National Series. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can keep up to date with all of our latest videos. As always, we appreciate your support and hope you enjoy this video. If you watched our last video, you know we talked about the time that Neil Bonnet piloted Dale Earnhardt's number 3 car in the Busch Series. Today, we're going to start out by talking about the 3 different times that Michael Waltrip drove that car in the Busch Grand National Series. Waltrip made his Winston Cup debut in 1985, driving 5 races before going full-time in 1986. The younger brother of Winston Cup superstar Darrell Waltrip made a handful of appearances in the Busch Series throughout his first few Winston Cup Series seasons. He won a race in 1988 driving for his brother and had another victory and a few top 5s in the number 30 for his Cup Series owner, Chuck Ryder. The 1989 AC Delco 200 at Rockingham saw Waltrip get a shot in the number 3 GM Goodwrench Chevrolet for Earnhardt. Waltrip qualified 13th and finished 7th. A few years later in 1994, Waltrip got 2 more chances to drive for his close friend. The Split-Fire 200 at Dover Downs was one to forget for Waltrip in a race full of attrition. He started 19th but only made it 22 laps before losing an engine and coming home 41st. 1 month later, Waltrip got another shot in the number 3 car, this time at Rockingham in the AC Delco 200. Waltrip got the chance to drive the 3 car as Earnhardt was looking to clinch his 7th Winston Cup Series championship that weekend. This time, things looked much better for Waltrip. He qualified 12th and told TNN's Buddy Baker that the car was absolutely hooked up. It didn't take long for Waltrip to work his way through the field, moving into the top 5 within the first 50 laps as his brother Darrell was in the booth for the race. Waltrip was driving the black number 3 car with a black eye. Mike Joy described it as something that looked like you'd get after walking into a baseball bat. Baker compared it to something you'd see out of the movie Rocky IV, while Darrell claimed that he had nothing to do with it. He explained that Michael claimed that he got stung by a bee. The younger Waltrip eventually moved to the front and led a lap, staying in the top 5 for most of the day as the race slowly came to a close. Waltrip closed in on leader Mark Martin during the final laps, pulling up to Martin's bumper out of turn 4, but it wasn't enough as Martin grabbed the victory. Waltrip came home second that day, which was ironic because it was a finish almost identical to the one the following day when Earnhardt held off Rick Mast to clinch his 7th Winston Cup title. Adding more to Waltrip's impressive drive was that it wasn't easy to beat Martin at the time. It was Martin's 11th Busch Series victory over his previous 31 starts, which also included a total of 16 top 3 finishes. We'll take a trip back in time to April of 1992, when Ken Schrader piloted his friend Ernie Irvin's number 4 Kodak Chevrolet in the Budweiser 250 at Bristol. Irvin was injured a few weeks earlier in a Busch Series crash at Atlanta, which saw him knocked unconscious, saw him break his collarbone, and bruise his jaw. As noted in one of our previous He Drove What videos, Bobby Labonte relieved Irvin the following day in the Winston Cup Series race at the track. As Irvin still recovered from his injuries, with his focus on the Winston Cup Series, the driver tapped Schrader to drive his Busch car at Bristol. Unfortunately, the rainy day turned out to be a precursor for Schrader, who had a disappointing day. He started near the back of the field, qualifying 27th out of 29 drivers. His day ended after only 171 laps, blowing an engine and finishing 24th in what turned out to be his only race behind the wheel of the number 4 car. A few months later at Rockingham, we saw another driver struggle in his only shot in a substitute effort, as Jimmy Spencer failed to finish the AC Delco 200 at Rockingham. As it has been well documented, Davey Allison had an incredibly tough 1992 season. He injured his ribs and back in a crash at Bristol. He was knocked out and received a concussion and a bruised lung after winning the Winston at Charlotte. A few months later, a horrifying crash at Pocono saw Allison fracture and dislocate his wrist, break his collarbone and forearm, and receive multiple facial bruises. That crash left Allison needing a 4.5-hour surgery as multiple plates and screws were inserted into his various injuries. To top all of it off, his brother Clifford tragically passed away following a Busch Series practice crash at Michigan in August. Despite all of this, Allison was still in contention for the Winston Cup, but because of that, he put multiple drivers in his Busch Series car for the remainder of the season. Red Farmer, Jeff Purvis, and Bobby Hillin Jr. all made starts in the car, but at Rockingham, Spencer was given a shot. At the time, Spencer had recently took over the number 12 car in the Winston Cup Series, which was owned by Davey's father, Bobby. Just like Schrader, the combination didn't turn out as planned. Davey actually practiced the car and planned on qualifying it, but decided against it as he didn't want to be shaky heading into the Winston Cup race the following day. Spencer went out and qualified 29th in the number 28 car. It seemed like things were going pretty promising off the bat, as Spencer quickly climbed into the top 20 early on. He soon went a lap down, but the car was still as fast as ever, as the Berwick, Pennsylvania native made a daring move off the restart to try to get his lap back. Soon thereafter, his day went up in smoke, literally, as the number 28 car pulled behind the wall with engine issues. He finished the race 32nd, one spot behind that number 4 Kodak car of Irvin. Speaking of Irvin and Allison, the following season saw Irvin take over the number 28 Winston Cup Series car after the tragic passing of Allison in July of 1993. Irvin departed the number 4 car for Larry McClure late in the season, leaving him without his usual number 4 car in the Busch Series. He took Davey's Mac Tool sponsorship to Charlotte and drove the number 41 car to a 31st place finish, which turned out to be his final race with his former Cup Series crew chief Tony Glover calling the shots. The following week at Martinsville, Irvin found himself filling in for Bill Bumgardner's team, who was without a full-time driver after a late-season split with Jack Sprague. He promptly took the car out and qualified third. Irvin, who was driving that beautiful neon number 74 car, quickly gave race leader Joe Nemechek a hard battle for the lead. Irvin couldn't get by Nemechek and seemed like he'd be a threat for the win all day, but that was not the case. Irvin slowly faded while staying in the top 10 for most of the day and brought the car home in 9th. The following week, Johnny Benson Jr. made his second start in the car, and the rest, you could say, is history. The 1994 Advance Auto 500 at Martinsville saw Dick Trickle step out of his usual number 64 for Dennis Shoemaker and make a spot start in quite possibly the most famous number in motorsports. The previous race at Charlotte saw Rodney Combs slam into the wall, which sent the driver to the hospital in need of x-rays. He eventually was diagnosed with a broken shoulder. This left the number 43 car open for the following race at Martinsville, as Richard Petty tapped Trickle to substitute for his injured driver. Trickle went out and qualified the French's Mustard Pontiac in an impressive third. He was running in the top 5 early on when the number 43 car broke a drive line and ended Trickle's day after only 37 laps. The driver was credited with a 35th place finish. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this video, and please make sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already.